name's Hayley. I am a Yorkshire-based artist specialising in textiles and even more specifically in embroidery. So I've been embroidering for around 35 years. I started embroidering when my grandma had been trying to teach me knitting for quite a while, and she actually got really annoyed with me because I just couldn't do it, and there was always holes in everything that I knitted. And she had a copy of the Anchor book of embroidery stitches, this sort of long, thin green book, and she gave me a copy of that, and I just started practicing the different embroidery stitches, and I just found that I really clicked with embroidery. And embroidered textiles have sort of always been around. We had quite a few in our home, things like tablecloths and tray cloths, and as we were regular visitors to National Trust properties, there was always things like tapestries and different embroidered textiles. And I think I've just always had an affinity for those sorts of things, and I've just found them really fascinating. So it was always something that I had a passion for. So I started exploring textiles as a sort of serious career when I went to do my degree in textile crafts at University of Huddersfield. I just fell in love with this idea that you could use textiles as a form of fine art rather than just something like fashion or interiors. And after I'd finished my degree, I went on to do a master's in textiles at Manchester School of Art, and I just sort of fell back in love with embroidery and the sort of art of hand embroidery, but then also moving into machine embroidery as well. I've been working freelance since 2012, and it's given me the opportunity to not only work on amazing projects with museums and heritage sites across the north, but also it's given me the chance to pass on the textile skills that I've learned over the years and teach them to other people so that they can start telling their own stories. And I think storytelling for me is sort of at the heart of what I do. My husband will get fed up of reading all the time when he proofreads for me things that say my practice uses fabric and thread to tell stories, but that's what it does. And I describe what I do as textile drawings and objects, and I suppose really what that means is instead of a pencil or a paintbrush, I'm picking up a needle and thread, and that's how I'm creating my work. And I love to sort of add 3D elements to it with traditional things like pin cushions and just what I refer to as soft sculpture. So similar to pop art in the 60s, just creating a sculpture made from fabric rather than ceramic or metal. I was commissioned by Hoop Creative Arts in Huddersfield to work on their project Going Sane, and alongside developing work with community groups in Calderdale, I was also asked to create some work in response to just the theme of mental health. And at the time I sort of thought to myself, I don't feel comfortable telling anyone else's story other than my own. It was something that I had a deep connection with as I've lived with depression and anxiety, and I created basically just a box of work that was around 52 weeks of living with the depression and anxiety, and I got such a wonderful response from that was really heartwarming, and people messaging me and saying things like, I thought I was alone in that, I didn't realise anyone else felt like that. And that's when I sort of started to tackle more sort of issues around mental health and well-being. I've also been lucky to work on a project called the Grief Series with lots of other artists. And the biggest part of that I worked on was in 2018, where we actually created an installation inside a caravan that toured around the UK and went over to Germany. And that was just exploring this idea of grief. And textiles are such a personal thing to all of us. We all have those textile memories from when we're young of a blanket that we got made or given, or a favourite cardigan, or even a soft toy. And textiles is just such a big part of who we are. And I've also tackled issues around binge eating disorder and emotional overeating in my exhibition Girls Who Eat Their Feelings, which was part of the Love Arts Festival in 2018 in Leeds. And that just, again, explored the idea of, I recorded everything I ate and drank in a 12-month period, and it was just sort of work created around that and really inspired by the things that I was eating and how my mood was changing and things like that. So I think I've always found textiles a really wonderful way to tell a story. I don't necessarily think I would ever sit down and maybe talk to somebody about mental health, but I think when there's textiles there and I can sort of share that story and again get that connection with people, and I've always been keen to sort of make people realise they're not alone. So yeah, I've just found that embroidery has been a great way to communicate those subject matters to people. So actually I've been really lucky because I work from home. So my studio is just the back bedroom in our house, and this means that during COVID-19 and especially during lockdown and in the early part of the year, I was really lucky that all my equipment and all my materials and everything has been at home. So in some ways it hasn't changed my practice, but I think the biggest part I sort of think about is actually I'm such a what we call a site responsive artist. So I was always going to museums and places like that to do my research and collaborating with other organisations. And now it's actually meant that I'm looking in the areas around where I live. So I'm fortunate to live in a place with lots of green space. I can go out for a walk every day and there's lots of trees and woodland. But also I've recently been inspired by street art. There's so much amazing graffiti around us. There's loads of different colours and textures. So some of my work has actually started to respond to that. And a friend of mine who's a keen cyclist has also showed us the app Strava, where you can record the walks that you go on. So I've been recording the route maps from our authorised perambulations, as we call them in our house. And I've just sort of been taking the route line, similar to if you were planning a route, on Google Maps or something, and it's just quite this sort of little abstract shape. And I've just been recording those as we've been walking and then taking them back into the studio and stitching them. So I think it's really sort of made me look more closely at the areas that I live rather than, maybe travelling to different places to find inspiration. And I've really enjoyed that. And I think I've become more connected to the area that I live. So I use quite a few different techniques in my work. In fact, one of the things I love about embroidery and textiles is that a lot of the processes haven't changed for hundreds of years, but I really love hand embroidery. It's a brilliant sort of portable craft. So just using the needle and thread to create these stitches and these stitched lines is a fantastic sort of way to share my story. And people always ask about things like a favourite embroidery stitch, and if you need to have really complicated ones. Honestly, my favourite stitch is backstitch, and I use it in so many of the things I do. One of the other things I'm really interested in as well is patchwork. So this idea of taking multiple fabrics and combining them into one piece of cloth. So I use that in things like my pin cushions that I make that often explore, as I've touched on before, the sort of ideas of journeys, both personal and literal. And also I've made quite a few pin cushions that commemorate family members that I've lost and things like that. So I use quite a range of different techniques and combine them together often combining them together with things like digital machine embroidery too. So digital embroidery is something that I came across when I was doing my master's, and basically the easiest way to describe digital embroidery for those of you who aren't familiar with it is if you get something like a t-shirt or a cap embroidered with a logo and things like that. It's basically that sort of technology, but there are home machines that you can get to do it. And what this allows me to do is sort of turn my drawings and photographs into embroideries. I have been working with a FAF Creative 3 machine and the 60 software package that comes with it. And I can create embroidery files from it. And the machine really does work like a traditional machine. The needle goes up and down and catches the spool thread, but it's moved basically by a computerized arm that moves around the embroidery hoop, and you can create these wonderful sort of stitched designs with it, and you can sort of really experiment with it by stopping the machine and changing the way changing the threads and sort of really changing what that final design will look like. And it's just a really interesting technique to explore, and took me completely out of my comfort zone when I first started using it, but now I've developed a sort of signature style working with it. So I think that creativity is just been a wonderful part of my life for as long as I can remember. It has helped me to sort of stay grounded and focused when my mental health perhaps hasn't been so good. And especially during COVID-19 and lockdown, I've really found that being creative and having, just some materials to work with has been a real sort of a blessing for me. And I encourage anyone to have a go, not only at embroidery and working with textiles, but, just any sort of craft is an amazing thing to try, and it's just really, really good for you and sort of good for the soul. So I sort of say to anyone, just even if you pick up a colouring book and some pens, or, just start doing a bit of doodling when you're sitting watching TV, just any form of creativity is so sort of good for us that I think everyone should be having a go and working with their hands.